Hey everybody, Brian the Brain here, and this is the third week of Mario March Madness here on Pantheon Plus. I'm hosting this month's special. My co-host for this week and next week is Jerome. He can be found on Twitter at JeromeC1985. And this has been quite the Mario experience because this week we're actually getting a live-action movie. It's The Wizard from December 15th, 1989. Somewhat of a modest box office success, but it kind of ties in with video game history, and we'll get into that as well because there was a big ROM shortage in 1988 where a lot of Nintendo games did not come out in the United States, so there was a need for some Nintendo stuff. This kind of came out of it. So, but before we get into the episode, we ask you to leave a 4 or 5 star review on any of the podcasting apps you're using, Spotify, Stitcher, whatever. That way more people find us here at The Real World and the good work that we're doing here. Last week we talked about the Mario animated shows, which were a mixed bag, but we kind of like the Mario 3 show. I think we're on the same page as that one. But this week we're moving to live action, and I already mentioned that there was this ROM chip shortage in 1988. And in preparation for Mario 3 that was coming up the next year, they needed some kind of like advertising vehicle because it was supposed to come out in 88 apparently, or 89. It ended up coming out in 90 because of that ROM shortage. So I don't know. They didn't know what to do because in Japan Mario 3 was already out that year, but because in '89 there wasn't the internet, obviously, people didn't really know about it. There wasn't that much exposure about it. If this happened today, I bet a lot of people would just import the game and find ways to play it here. But in this case, people didn't even know. Mostly didn't even know that it was already out in Japan. So what do you do to promote Mario 3? Okay, so Tom Pollock of Universal Studios approached Nintendo and kind of came up with a video game movie. So they kind of pitched some ideas here and there, and they came up with this idea of doing like a Karate Kid movie with video games. Now, I'm a fan of the first 2 Karate Kid movies, not so much in Cobra Kai, which I know is a sin, but that kind of formula I think works perfectly for what they were trying to accomplish because it builds to a good finale in this movie. The script might be poor in the first 2 acts, but I think it does build to a good third act. But in this case, I think it was a good idea to do this movie. It's just I think the script was not there, and I think they came up with it in such a short amount of time that it didn't really pan out to its fullest potential. Because, this was rushed, obviously, because they wanted to get it out to promote Mario 3, which was the big reveal at the end. So it was just kind of like a mixed bag in terms of like the timing, but I think the intentions were good. It's just that, they just didn't have time to develop a good script because they were such a short turnaround for this. Also, Bo Bridges and Christian Slater were, they starred in the movie as well. They had no interest in video games coming into this movie. So very interesting stuff that we got Christian Slater and Bo Bridges coming in, and they had no interest in video games, yet they were cast, and yet during filming they were obviously playing it. They were playing it in the movie and became Nintendo fans. So crazy stuff. What do you think of Bo Bridges starring in this movie? What do you think of Christian Slater starring in this movie? Fred Savage starring in this movie? A lot of random people in this movie, but some good side actors or some good character actors as well. But what an interesting cast, Jerome.
This cast is a definite mixed bag. There are some performances in this movie that we could get into today that I really like. I love the Bo Bridges, Christian Slater movie. Those are my favorite scenes. I think those two have a great familial chemistry together, and I think when the movie is at its best, then it's when those 2 characters are on screen. I don't know about you, but I was getting like Goofy movie I was making a Goofy movie connection whenever I saw those 2 because very similar ages, Max and Christian Slater's character, Bo Bridges and Goofy, kind of a road trip thing going on. So those 2 are great. Fred Savage is a dick. Like, I understand that he's like trying to help this kid Jimmy, like his half brother, but he's just a dick the entire time. It's so weird because in this movie and like in Princess Bride, he's also kind of a dick as well. And I'm just wondering, is Fred Savage just a dick at everything he does? Because of course there's the Boy Meets World episode. I haven't watched The Wonder Years in a number of years, and yeah, I didn't like the Fred Savage performance, and I think that hindered my enjoyment of it. I don't think that he had any chemistry whatsoever with Jenny Lewis, who is playing Haley, and I think that's a huge problem. I think you have to kind of buy into their relationship. I think there are definitely some fun moments that they have with Jimmy in Reno. Like that's probably the best in terms of their scenes is Reno. Yeah, there's some really good ideas, and this was not unpleasant to watch. But when you say that this movie is rushed, I definitely can see that, even though I think the ending is really good. And we'll talk about it later. But here's what I will say. If you have not watched this movie, I would strongly recommend that you do so. We, of course, spoil everything. But this is a specific case where I think watching the whole movie and seeing the ending actually, it does make a difference. It had a huge effect on my feelings on the movie. So definitely make sure you watch this before listening to the rest of this podcast, because the ending is very good.
For sure. And last week I kind of mentioned me being confused as a kid when watching this movie, confusing this with Pee Wee Herman's Big Adventure. And it turns out they both go to the dinosaurs in Cabazon, California, near Palm Springs. I've been there like one time. I never actually got out when I went to Palm Springs a couple years ago. But I was just kind of amalgamation of both, I guess, confusing both movies together as one, but they both go to those dinosaurs. So it's not like I was wrong initially thinking that it was just in Pee-wee, but it was in both. But, shout out to that location because I think it's still out there. It's one of those iconic locations in the middle of the desert in California that if you've never seen it and if you're driving by, I would stop. I would totally recommend stopping, even though I didn't stop. But yeah, it's quite the visual. Let's just say that. I like how they kind of use that as like the place where Jimmy wanted to go, the little boy, which we'll talk about in a second. But he wanted to go there, and he couldn't really communicate that. All he could say was California, but he couldn't really specify where. So I thought that was really interesting that it was the dinosaurs in the middle of California. Um, this movie has developed a cult following, even though it had a budget of $6 million, grossed $14 million, which is decent for 1989. But of course, with a movie like this, and you got Nintendo and the nostalgia involved, it did create a cult following. And since then there have been retro game tournaments. There's always retro game tournaments everywhere, but the bigger ones have had like guest stars from the movie. Luke Edwards, Fred Savage, and Jenny Lewis have made appearances like across the country at these tournaments, and I think that's such an awesome thing to do because it keeps you in that pop culture, like you're still around kind of thing, and it still kind of makes you relevant, even though Jenny Lewis is kind of like an independent, small artist now in music. I just love that idea that they're coming up to tournaments and just kind of like playing the same roles again and kind of reliving that nostalgia. I think that's awesome. Like that's something really fun that I wish I would have experienced when I was like in college or something. If I was at some random retro tournament, all of a sudden, like not Fred Savage, but maybe like Jenny Lewis showing up and just kind of like being nostalgic about it. I thought that was really cool. So director Todd Holland said that Universal made him shoot the whole script. Now the script apparently was 150 pages, or a little more so than 150 pages. And if you know the math in movies, especially with like non-action movies, a page of like normal script is 1 minute. So he was looking at way over 150 minutes of footage. And so since he shot the entire script, like he ended up with this 150-minute movie that he had to cut down to 90 minutes. Now, there are some plot holes and logic gaps in this movie, and I keep thinking once I read that, like, oh, they must have had these other scenes in. And when you watch the 93-minute version or whatever, it seems like there's just plot holes and logic gaps, but it's probably in this 150-minute version that was actually released recently on Blu-ray, which I think I might actually check out because this really had a strong ending, like Jerome mentioned, and the first two acts are kind of weak, but I wonder if it's not as weak as we think because there was a bunch of stuff cut out. But the stuff that we were given, I would say the first two acts are still pretty weak. But I'm really interested in this 150-minute version, and I don't think I'd be saying that normally, but because like there was that great third act, I think there is some potential in this director's cut, so to speak. But I know Jerome was interested, and that kind of shocked the hell out of me.
I want to point out that Kevin Ford, who is my co-host on J&K Presents, is a huge fan of this movie. He even sent me a picture of the Blu-ray version of this film. And I think one of the things, I have so many observations about this movie, and I think it connects to a lot of the things that you were texting me about. So this movie is very much like a kid's version of Rain Man, which had come out a year earlier. And Jimmy is very clearly coded as autistic, even if he's not autistic. And if you want to make the argument that he's suffering from some form of PTSD, okay, that's fine. I'll buy that. But like autism is also very clearly on the table as well. But I think that the Jimmy part of it, I think the actor does a very good job. And I know, are you a fan of the other prominent movie that he is a part of?
Who, Jimmy? I don't even know what other
Yeah,
movie he was in.
Little Big League. Little Big League. I sent this to you.
Little Big League. Oh wait, he was the kid?
He was the kid, the kid who becomes
Okay.
the owner of the
Yeah,
Twins.
because ever since I saw the movie as a kid and then recently playing like some MLB The Show, I've had this like fantasy of like getting rich and just running a baseball team like him, but having not being like an executive position, just being the coach of the team or the manager. Like that's been my like sports fantasy forever, and I've told this to my friends. So I guess it's all ties together because that's one of my sports fantasies.
Fair enough, but I think that with that understanding, I think that changes my perception of it. The fact that he is always building things constantly, it's just like, okay, come on, let's be serious. And yeah, I one of the other things I said is that in 2023, they give the kid real help, and he's just able to build things and play video games, and they don't really have to. They don't worry about it. I'm sure you've seen the memes of like Star Wars when they immediately resolve an issue and just put the credits up. Like that's what would have happened in this movie, I would say. And obviously, it's 1988, 1989, so you can't really do that. But I think that the Jimmy part of it doesn't really bother me because I think the payoff ultimately makes the journey worth it. But some of the stuff that we get along the way, I think, is problematic. And I think this. Can we just talk about the possible sex pervert that is in this movie? Not real. I'm not saying the actor is. I'm just saying that the character.
Yeah, I didn't even look up his official name. All I put him in the name in the notes is Kid Napper with a hyphen in between as a joke because he's
Well, his name is Mr. Putnam, and boy, what a name to give a kid to kidnapper.
yeah, he's a kid snatcher, but he's snatching kids that are legally on the run that he can legally take back to their parents, which I don't think is a real job. Maybe it is. I don't know because it just seems so. It's like legal kidnapping, right? That's what it is, right? I don't know. I don't know. It's
In the 1980s, like in the 70s and 80s, this is absolutely a real job. I will tell you that.
oh my god. Oh my god. Well,
I mean, I don't know that officially, but come on, especially in the state of Utah, which is where they're at. Of course
okay,
it would be.
okay, I get it. It's just so fucking weird because this guy's a creep, and he's all about the money, but he's doing like borderline pervy things. I don't know because he's
Listen,
grabbing.
all I'm going to say is do not, if this was 2023, you don't want to look at his search history. There's a moment when he is going after Jimmy and the cops are taking him away. And I texted Brian. I said, that is not the first time that he's been carried away by cops for trying to snatch a kid. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, there you go. There you go. So yeah, so this again, I mentioned the Super Mario Brothers 3 connection during the video game Armageddon Final. They used it, but they wanted to kind of reveal it in the film before, like early in the movie, I guess. But they just kind of waited to the end, which is fine. But then when it finally revealed, I guess it kind of created this like slow hype because it kind of, I guess, some like low key buzz, like oh shit, Mario 3 is like real and it's coming out soon. So I guess that was the whole point of it all. But I mean, it did lead to. I don't know if this was like part of it, but Mario 3 had incredible sales. It was going to have incredible sales no matter what. But I think this did kind of build that. It kind of like started the hype train, basically. I think that moment at the end, because you kind of saw some things that I don't think I've seen in the other Mario games, where you kind of like switch the picture and try to land on the 3 parts of the face and then get the bonus. I don't think that was until Mario 3. So when you see them for the first time, it's like, oh shit, that's something I gotta like look forward to when I play the new Mario game coming out. So as a kid, even though I wasn't great at Mario games again, I see that. And at the time, Mario was already out because I watched this like much later on. But I was like, wow, like that's really cool. Like if I had never seen that before, and like got a preview of that in a movie, I'd be like, oh shit, like they really hyped this up. So as a kid, you probably really got excited when you saw that. And then you mentioned Jimmy Woods. He's on the autism spectrum, but they don't say it, and it's very frustrating because I feel like they mention autism in Rain Man. I'm not crazy, right? I've seen that movie a bunch of times. They say the word autism, right?
I haven't seen the movie in a while, so I don't know if they use that word directly, but it's very clearly coded as that if it isn't.
Yeah, and then they're trying to do the PTSD thing because Jimmy unfortunately witnessed the death of his twin sister, which you don't even find out till halfway. And I feel like I don't know if they should have waited halfway to reveal that. Maybe they should have revealed it at the beginning because it just makes his mom, who seems so distant, because his mom and dad ended up getting divorced afterward, and Jimmy and Christian Slater ended up with the dad, and he ended up with his mom. And there's a stepdad played by Sam McMurray, who's a great character actor. If you've never seen his work on Dinosaurs as the neighbor, go check that out because he does some awesome voice acting in that show. If you've never seen it, or if you never even knew that he was the neighbor, but he's just treating it like he's property. You know what I mean? And like I'm responsible for your child now that I'm the stepdad or whatever, and just saying these insulting things to Bo Bridges in the movie. It's kind of fucked up, but he treats it as just PTSD or whatever, and doesn't even know what autism is. It seems like so. There's this big gap in knowledge what we have now in 2023 compared to 1989 in terms of these child psychology, psychologists and all these things that kids go through and just misdiagnosing things and clearly misdiagnosing this. So it's just one of those things that's kind of frustrating, but at the same time, it shows you what we were evolving from in 1989. Kind of like the concussion thing. Like we didn't know the severity of concussions until much later on. So it's kind of one of those things where you just kind of look back and like, wow, like that's a really big learning curve right there. So once we get to the story, we know that Jimmy Woods is this young boy. We see him at the beginning walking in the middle of the desert to say California. The cops pick him up, and there his parents are, his mom and stepdad, and they're just trying to figure out what's going on. And they're considering putting him at a mental asylum, which is absolutely like the wrong thing to do and such a shortcut as a parent when you can't handle being a parent to a child with some kind of like disorder. It's so frustrating when I hear that kind of shit, but that's what they were leaning towards. And of course, Fred Savage hears about it. His brother, who's living with Bo Bridges, their dad, and he's just like, "I'm not. That's not happening." He's like, "I'm not going to have it." So he does the Tom Cruise and breaks out Jimmy from the asylum in the most. I don't know. Did you see any like personnel at all, Jerome? Because there was like none except the hostess guy.
What is up with movies and mental hospitals not having enough staff? I feel like we've addressed this multiple times. We talked about it with New Mutants. We talked about it with Nightmare on Elm Street 3. I know that these places are underfunded, so maybe that's the angle that they're going for, especially in a post Ronald Reagan world. But it's profoundly bizarre to me that there is literally no staff, and they kind of deserve what they get here, and the fact that the kids are able to run away. It feels like it takes a long time for this movie to get going in some ways. Like the positive thing is that they're basically on the road 10 minutes into the movie, which I think is a good thing. But I think the problem is it takes a really long time for them to find their end goal of getting to California for the video game tournament. Like obviously Jimmy wants to go there, but California is a big ass state, and who knows what part of California they're trying to go to. So I really like the fact that we're on the road in 10 minutes, but some of the revelations that are occurring and some of the complicated family dynamics, it takes a while to figure some of that stuff out. And I almost wonder if the 2.5 hour cut, which this movie should not be 2.5 hours. On the other hand, I would guess that a 2.5 hour version of this movie is significantly better.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that they kind of, I don't know, cut some stuff out that way. I don't know, because again, we'll get into more logic gaps later on in the movie, but I kind of feel like they should have laid out the family dynamics right off the bat and not have it be revealed halfway through. That way, I think you're more like, okay, now the characters are more focused. You're still kind of getting to know the characters halfway through up until those revelations. I feel like they should have just let us know at the beginning and then just take us on the ride. And then once they're on the road, like they're not on the road initially to go to the video game tournament. That's kind of like the assumption. What it is that Jimmy wants to go to California. So they're just like, okay, we're going to California. We don't know why, but we're just going to take you there. And then on the way there, they meet Jenny, or Haley, excuse me, played by Jenny Lewis, the redhead on the cover, and she's kind of like on her own kind of road journey as well. Like her parents are kind of absentee parents as well. We find out that her mom is a gambler and like lost most of their money, and they live in Reno or whatever. So she's just been traveling wherever, visiting family around the country just to get away from them, apparently. So they're playing this Double Dragon machine in the bus station, and here's where the logic kind of goes out the window. Like, apparently Jimmy gets 50,000 in Double Dragon, but it's like a clip for like 1 minute, which is impossible to get 50,000 in 1 minute on Double Dragon. But Haley notices this. She tries to hustle them. Jimmy ends up winning, and she kind of ends up getting hustled herself. But she realizes, okay, let's team up because I think we can make more money if we team up together. So they kind of band together, and they're kind of hustling kids across the country and arcade machines across the country with it's like a white man can't jump kind of vibe. I'm trying to think of other movies where they hustle people. Kingpin with Woody Harrelson. They did the same thing. So yeah, I'd like this trope, even though I see it a lot in movies, but in road trip movies, I think it works out if you have no money and you're trying to get across the country. Yeah, you're going to hustle and maybe screw some people over in the meantime, but it's not like he cheated. Like Jimmy was never cheating in the games. They just told him, hey, you want to play this kid who's really good at video games? And these kids got hustled into it, and they hustled a bunch of teens on the road. So that was a fun little part of the movie. While at the same time, you have Beau Bridges and Christian Slater and Jerome's favorite part of the movie doing their own kind of thing. And it's very interesting because they're trying to find the kids. Well, they just think it's Jimmy and Fred Savage's character. They're traveling across country, and they're just trying to like bond, I guess. And you can tell Beau Bridges is a very, I don't know, let's say a lack of communication type father, where he kind of avoids subjects by bringing up other subjects that are not necessarily important at the time. And he keeps bringing up the fact that Christian Slater is this older teen that likes to sneak out and drink. And he's trying to make him this enemy when he's not really the enemy. And the more important thing is fighting the kid. It's almost like he's creating these like alternate, problems for himself to kind of like distract himself with the actual problems that have him with his family. So that was the kind of breakdown I had with their relationship. Because Christian Slater's even like, I can't even talk to my own dad when I'm trying to have a normal conversation. And you can just side with Christian Slater more so with Beau Bridges with their relationship. And that's what I feel, because he's trying to be the rational one. And I've always, I've been in that situation where you're the older sibling, and you end up being the parent to the parent sometimes, or a parent to your younger siblings, because the parents just don't know what the fuck to do in that moment, and they're just acting like what a parent shouldn't be. So I get that feeling, and I think Beau Bridges kind of turns the corner towards the end, and it sucks they didn't really give him a full arc, because it feels like there was something he had to learn that he didn't learn at the end or something. But I felt like Christian Slater was a really good supportive character. And I enjoyed their dynamic and the fact that he kind of teaches his dad how to play Nintendo on the road.
Yeah, and a very infamous level, I guess we can get into in a couple minutes here. But I think that as we kind of march along here, having the kids get their money taken from them by the random truckers and the teenagers felt a little excessive. I think the fundamental problem with this movie, and why it doesn't totally work for me, is the fact that the people behind this movie, the director, cinematographer, those people, like, it's pretty clear to me that they have either never played video games or played very few video games, because a lot of the things that they do, even in the last scene when they're playing Super Mario 3, stretches credulity in terms of how realistic it is to get all those points in such a short amount of time. I think that's one of the biggest issues with the movie, quite honestly, and I think it's something that would probably be executed a lot better today in 2023, because we know so much more about video games. And honestly, I mean, video games have changed so much in that time, and even video game movies have changed so much in that time. I mean, you look at something like Super Mario Brothers, made in 1993, which we're going to be discussing next week, and then you compare it to 30 years later, here we are, and we have an incredible adaptation of The Last of Us that is on HBO, and just how we are better able, because of special effects and because video games are taken so much more seriously now. I mean, to me, the thing about this movie is that the video game tournament is an excuse to get to California and have the ending. The video game is not ultimately the point of the movie. And I think that shows in the way that video games are treated and how unrealistic some of these portrayals are.
Yeah, so I guess halfway through the road trip, I forget. Haley has this magazine that shows like this big tournament at Universal Studios Hollywood, and that's like, okay, we're gonna go there. It's $50,000. We'll split the money, and that's kind of where they end up going. And then they also meet this guy named Lucas, who's this.
By the way, I just want to say that $50,000 in 1989, that is $119,000 in 2023. So $50,000 is a good amount of money now still, but back then the value would almost be double what it is.
Right, and let's not mention the tax part either. But yeah, even with the taxes, it's a lot of money that they're willing to split. And so they meet this character named Lucas. Now he's supposed to be this antagonist for Jimmy, because he's this great video game player as well. Now in the movie, it's this they do a challenge, but you see that Lucas has this fucking power glove. Now, okay, Jerome, did you have or played the power glove when you were a kid?
I had a Nintendo. I had the gun. I did not. I never used the Power Glove though.
Have you heard the stories about how shitty the power glove is?
No. This is new information.
Okay, so I've been doing some research unintentionally because I watch angry video game nerd videos back in the day and other things and other retro video game stuff, and the power glove is not what it seems. Like, especially if you watch that movie 8-Bit Christmas that came out on HBO Max like 2 years ago, I think now it was. Maybe last year, I don't know, but basically the power glove is not what it's meant to be because it's based on like motion sensor and stuff like that. But the technology was so like rough at the time for doing that. Like, can you imagine a Wii type system in 1989? Like, it's just it doesn't work because you need to have like a certain distance from the TV. You need to have like the glove in range of the TV because I think it's like radio RF radio frequency or something like that, or not even that. I think it's like something else. Because like the Nintendo gun was never 100% accurate either when you play Duck Hunt. So the Power Glove is not it's not accurate like that. So when he's playing the racing game and he's just using the Power Glove and doing the best racing he's ever done apparently in that game, it's complete bullshit. Like someone was obviously using a controller for that footage because the Power Glove is not that accurate. It's not. It's never been that accurate. If you play the Power Glove, any game with the Power Glove, A, your arm is going to get tired. B, it's not going to match the motion you're trying to do. And C, it's just like what's the point by 5 minutes of it because you're so tired? It was such a waste of time. And like you could see the kids' frustration in 8-Bit Christmas in that movie and how bad it is. So when this kid is using it, I'm just like, no fucking way. And you just mentioned how like they had no idea what video games were like, the makers of the movie, like actual video games what were like. This is one of those cases. And then again, another case I have to mention is when Bo Bridges is playing a Nintendo. So Christian Slater fixes the Nintendo that he's bringing along on their road trip, and he plugs it in the hotel. He goes back to sleep. He wakes up and his dad's playing, and he's playing Ninja Turtles. Now, he's never played the Ninja Turtles or a Nintendo ever before, yet somehow he was up all night and it was able to get to the third level. Now, notoriously, the second level is one of the hardest levels like in any Nintendo game because you have to go underwater and deactivate these bombs, but there's like these electrical fences that you have to go through and you end up losing a bunch of lives just to finish the second level. So you're telling me that Bo Bridges, this dad, who has never played Nintendo in his life, all of a sudden just turns on the turtle game and then within like a 4 or 5 hour period figures out how to pass that level, which I can't even beat like normally myself at this age with that Cowabunga collection that came out. Oh man, that still gets me to this day. And then later on.
So here's what I'm gonna say. Had Jimmy ever played video games before this, before he had tried Double Dragon? They never really make that clear, do they?
I think it is because they implied that there was I think that was Fred Savage in Nintendo now that I think about it. So I don't know. It could be the arcade kid.
Here's what I would say. I would say that if you look at a Nintendo, and I am certainly not going to defend this all the way, but I think if you're looking at it logically, in terms of how you play video games well back in the day, so much of it was about hand-eye coordination. So perhaps that's the argument that they're making is that Bo Bridges is the father, Christian Slater is one son, Jimmy is another son, that this family apparently has incredible hand-eye coordination, and that is why they are all so good at video games.
Well, if you want to tie that in to the part where they're destroying the car of the kidnapper, he was pretty accurate with that shovel. So maybe there's something to that. I don't know, but man, just frustrated because later on in the movie, there's another montage where they show Jimmy training, and they show the turtle level, and he just gets through it so easily in the 4 second clip or whatever, and I'm just like, okay, they know about that level. They know how frustrating it is, and that's a legendary level to this day. I've seen YouTube videos about that level, whether or not it's legitimately hard or people just complaining because they can't focus enough, or I don't know, but it's a fucking hard level if you ever play that original Nintendo Turtles game. So I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a family thing, but there are some cool montages in this. I gotta mention the "Send Me an Angel" by Real Life montage. I just love that fucking song. And Jerome knows I'm obsessed with that fucking song now. It's so fucking good. The montage was okay because it's a road trip montage and it looked okay. Like it was shot decent, but the song is just banging. So that really got me into it. It was also used in Rad. I've never seen Rad, but I've seen the one scene in Rad where they use the song, and it's like a dance competition at a school dance, and there's actual BMX bikers dancing with their bikes. So there you go. Um, so yeah, the kidnapper is kind of like, he's trying to find the kids, but he's a creep. And eventually, like, the kids are in Reno where they're trying to, like, get some extra money, and Haley knows how to play crap, so she's using a adult friend of her to yell instructions and get money and hustle in Vegas, or excuse me, in Reno. Uh, but at the same time, the kidnapper is kind of following behind, and eventually he does catch up to him in Reno. He gets Jimmy, but then Haley, smartly, I think, yells out, "He touched my breast!" And then every fucking person in the building is looking at him like a perv because he's also holding Jimmy in a very awkward position. So I was like, "Oh, this dude is fucking fucked now. Like, fuck this guy. He is fucked." And then he kind of gets away a little bit. But yeah, that was an interesting scene, Jerome. And I know that guy creeps you out. He creeps me out. But I think Haley did the right thing.
I would absolutely agree. I think they did the right. Again, I think the Reno stuff is probably some of the strongest stuff in terms of the kids, and I just wish that there was a way that they could have done more of that. And I couldn't help but think, to me, I look at the director, and I just can't help but think, like, what if you had like a John Avildsen directing this instead? John Avildsen, probably best known for directing Rocky and The Karate Kid, and obviously video games are very different than something physical like karate or something physical like boxing. But I mean, if you want to talk about like great montages, like I think of those movies as having great montages. And if you get that level of director for this movie, I can't help but think, like, there's got to be a better way of doing a video game montage than what they're doing here. I agree with you that the soundtrack for this movie is good. Yeah, I like this much better than the movie we are discussing next week for sure. But I think for me, the problem comes down to they have this montage and it's nothing special. It's very hard to understand how Jimmy is getting better. Like, the thing is that Jimmy starts out as being really good at video games. So, like, what is the point of this? It's a very weird choice on their part. And obviously they're trying to go for, oh, this is like an 80s underdog movie in its own way. But Jimmy is an underdog in the fact that he is kind of dead inside because his twin sister died, but he's kind of a savant when it comes to video games. So it's kind of this very weird dynamic that they have going on that I'm never quite sure that the movie figures out. But I do appreciate the fact that again Jimmy, I think he does a very good performance because he does it. The only word he says is California, so all of it is like face acting and eye acting, and that is hard, man. Like, especially for a kid. Like, I think it would be really hard to do a movie like this because I think you would just end up relying on being like a cute kid. But he can't do that. Like, he can't be a cute kid. He has to be, like, again, dead inside and just doing all this acting, staring at a screen. So I give him a ton of credit. I don't think this is an easy role, and I think you could have very easily ended up with an even worse movie. But the fact that this turns out as good as it does, I think, is because of him, as well as Beau Bridges and Christian Slater.
Yeah, so eventually they leave Reno and they head up at Universal Studios Hollywood and they enter the tournament. And this tournament is pretty epic because, like, they got this host forgot to get his name, but the host is like this WWE style announcer.
Oh my God, Brian! He was literally, you could literally almost see the cocaine sweating out of his body.
Like I said, WWE style announcer of the 80s, 90s. Um, less
How dare you disrespect the Fink like that?
I was less Todd Pettengill ish, but more like a Doc Hendricks.
No, he's more. This guy is more of a shyster, like in a Vegas vein, like a Vegas host than a WWE host. I would say, like, this is the type of guy that you would see at like the local comedy club hosting, perhaps, or I don't know. I just did not get a WWF vibe from him because, as even though one of the ring announcers was a pedophile, it's a very different vibe to me. But again, just sweating in cocaine. There's a point where they do an intermission. That guy is absolutely doing a line between shows, so to speak. So yeah,
He was hyped. He had a great British accent. I think it's British, but he was just so like he made you hyped up to see the kids win and participate. Because like when they announced the finalist, he really hypes them up, and that's what you're supposed to do as like a host. I think like if you're hosting a competition like this, you got to put the competitors over, and he put them over. I was like, wow, he's doing the job. He knows what he's supposed to be doing. He knows his role, and he's doing it well, and he's getting these kids over, and the crowd is super hyped. I love the design of the set. I guess apparently the set design is based on like it's like a subtle thing that's like it's kind of looks like the building blocks that Jimmy was building or something like that. That's what they were kind of going for. A little too much thought into it, I think, but still. So they're really hyped up. They get to the finals. Jimmy's in the final. They reveal Mario 3, and everyone's excited because it kind of does put everyone on a level playing field because up to that point, there was only like 90 something games on Nintendo, and they had to train for those 90 specific games. So once they got to the final, I was like, okay, what game are we going to have? They picked Mario 3 because it means everyone has never played, the three competitors have never played it. Therefore, it's an even playing field. And I was like, when you put it that way, that makes a hell of a lot of sense. And it makes it an even playing field. And I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But the problem is now the kidnapper and the mom and the stepdad are there, and as well as Bo Bridges and Christian Slater. They're trying to get Jimmy back, and they're on this big chase scene through the Universal Studios lot. And I marked out because as a kid, I went on the tram ride, the Hollywood tour, when I was like 3 or 4, and that's when the King Kong thing was there. And I was scared as shit as a kid watching that live King Kong in the lot. So when I saw it here, like a few years later, I think I watched this in like 94, 95, and I went to Universal around 92, 93. I finally like saw clear as day what the King Kong thing looked like, and I was like, yeah, that is still kind of scary. And then I see the kids yelling and screaming. I was like, yeah, that's what I was going through when I was a kid. I had the same thing. Like, just it's intimidating if you've never seen the King Kong attraction before and you're like a 5-year-old kid. It's intimidating. Because it's like you've never seen that live before, and I was really like intimidated as a kid, where I was like hiding on the tram ride. So that was a cool nostalgia pop for me. And then once that debacle goes down, like Jimmy ends up in the final again. They run away. He ends up on stage in the final, and then everyone is in the crowd now watching him. His parents are rooting him on, even though the mom is like, I don't know. The mom only has like 2 or 3 lines of dialogue, and it sucks because it makes it seem like she's a shitty mom. But I don't know what they were going for.
When in reality, she's probably just a bad actor, because I don't know if you noticed this, Brian, but when you watch the last scene, which you're going to get to in a second, do you notice who 90% of the reaction shots are focused on? Because it sure as hell isn't her.
Yep, I noticed that too. I don't know if they were trying to bury the character or they just had bad miscasting. So it's unfortunate. But Jimmy's in the competition along with Lucas and another girl. Jimmy wins. He wins the leaderboard, and it's again, you mentioned the non-realism because apparently he travels. I don't know. They do like 6 or 7 levels in the game in a short amount of time in Mario 3, and it's weird because it's like some aspects of the game were not introduced yet, but somehow the crowd knew like, Jimmy, you got to do this and do this, and it's like, how do you know that? It's like it's Mario. It's like an instinct thing because I guess in Mario 1 there was the hidden was a hidden pipe that takes you to the final level, like right off the bat. Is that accurate?
No, there's if you go to 1-2, I can't believe you don't know this. There's you keep going in 1-2 and you find the 3 pipes that take you. You can go to level. You can skip to levels 2, 3, or 4. So that's the goal. And I forget. I think it's either level 4 or 5. You can skip to 6, 7, or 8, I believe. I don't know if that's quite accurate, but I know that there are two pipes that where you can skip to another level.
And that was the big thing here is that they were telling Jimmy to find this warp, and he found it. But it's still weird because how would you know that if you'd never know the game was even coming out? But I guess it's just Mario instincts, right? It's just like it's a Mario game. It's got to have a warp. So they just instinctively knew. But for some reason, Lucas didn't do that. Lucas went all the way through, and I thought that was kind of weird. And they also do what I did like too is like it's the three life thing. So once Jimmy was on his last life, it was just like, oh, it's pure underdog story at that point because I don't even think Lucas died or the little girl. I think they were still on full three lives. So he was on his
Now
last life.
the little girl died, and that's kind of what cost her. And they literally cast the nerdiest looking person, or they dolled her down to look like a nerd because boy oh boy they were giving off those vibes. I guess we could have just been happy they had a girl on stage because given what video games reputation are, not great in terms of how they treat women. Maybe we should have just been happy with that, but boy did they code her a very certain way.
For sure. And Jimmy wins and everyone's happy. So they're driving home at the end. All of a sudden he sees the dinosaurs and he yells, California, California. They stop the car. He runs inside. Everyone's like, what's going on? And then he opens up the box and shows them the picture. And then, Fred Savage realizes, oh, this is the last time we were all like together as a family on this California trip. And we took this picture here. And so to Jimmy, it's like this, this memory of his sister, right? And so he's got all these pictures or whatever, and puts them in the lunchbox that he's been holding all movie, and he leaves it in the dinosaur as this commemorative thing. I guess is like this memorial for his sister, and they all take off, and everyone's crying, and Jerome is crying, I was crying, and I was like, God damn, where did this third act come from? Because it's only one writer. It's just one writer, and if you look at the script, it's like how did Act 1 and Act 2 go from that to this great borderline great third act? I don't know. Is there more deleted scenes?
This is why we need to watch the 2.5 hour cut, because I feel like this third act might be more representative of the shooting script as opposed to how they edited the movie.
Yeah, that's my thinking too. As soon as I read that there was a director's cut of 150 minutes and you had this, I was like, okay, there's something up because that third act was really good. Not just this scene, but the build up to the tournament and the tournament itself and all the hype that goes with it. The chase part in the middle was okay, but I think it was just like the drama of Jimmy being like down to one life and winning it all, the underdog story, plus this. It had that Rocky type feel at the end. And I guess that's obviously what they're going for. But this actually literally changed your rating by a full point, didn't it?
I would have said this is like a 5 or 5.5, but the ending made me bump it up to a 6.
Incredible. Yeah, I have it at a 6.5. That's kind of where I'm at on this. But again, we gotta one day. I think we're not review it, but we're gonna mention that we watched this 150-minute version of The Wizard on an off day. Maybe it's a good day. I don't know, but we're gonna watch it eventually. I think because I think we're so intrigued by it of what the potential of this movie could have became. But overall, it's a 6.5 out of 10 for me. The strengths are the performances. I think everyone did a solid job except the mom. Treating video games as a sport, I think, is a good idea because that's the precursor to esports, and that's a huge, huge business nowadays that makes millions of dollars. The soundtrack was good, as I mentioned. A lot of NKOTB, and if you don't know who that is, that's New Kids on the Block, and they had a lot of songs in the background of this one, and that kind of fit what they were going for because 89 teens. Yeah, that just makes sense. The very good third act, and the Nintendo nostalgia, I think, was really good in this one, especially when they're calling the Nintendo hotline. Holy shit, I didn't even know that existed until I watched the High Scores documentary a couple of years ago, and just the idea of a Nintendo hotline with a bunch of people and a bunch of notebooks with each notebook about each game and all the hidden facts and stuff. Just mind-blowing stuff, man, because, I mean, that's what the internet became. So there you go. And of course, the weakness is the script is poor, but again, we don't know what a majority of the shooting script was, but what we were given, Act 1 and Act 2 were kind of poor. And then Act 3 is just, like, really good. And then we got more plot holes and gaps. It's like one of the gaps that I was talking about is in the middle of the movie is that the kids, I guess, are sleeping in this abandoned, I don't know, farmhouse or something. And these teens in this truck come by and like beat them up for like hustling them. We never see the scene of them hustling these kids. So it's just like, where do these kids come from, and why are they so mad? It's like, oh, they got hustled. But I guess that might be one of those deleted scenes that is in the 150-minute cut. So overall, 6.5 out of 10.
Probably.
Yeah,
So I just want to say I'm not a huge fan of Fred Savage's performance again. I think he veers too much into kind of being a dick, and I think I wanted more affection and humanity from that character, especially for Jimmy, if not for Haley. Like, I understand you need a movie, you need some level of conflict, so I think putting the conflict between those two is fine, but I I never get the sense of like why he likes Jimmy. Like, that for me is a huge reason why I think this movie is kind of hindered. I think the soundtrack is pretty good. I think there are a couple of really good songs, and I appreciated that. I think that what you said about the script, I'm not sure. Script editing, like, I think it's either one or the other. I think assessing kind of the plot holes and the logic gaps. I mean, every movie is going to have its plot holes. Like, certainly, I'm sure every movie that we've ever discussed is going to have some level of plot hole. Nothing is going to be perfect, but I think you have to have some internal logic, and that's the problem. Is I don't think there's an internal logic to this movie, and the biggest example that I'm going to give to you is they never give us a sense of the geography of like where they're at, where they're going, what the map looks like. And like, I almost think you needed like an Indiana Jones like map to see and track them, because I think the problem also comes when the other, like when the kidnapper and Bo Bridges and Christian Slater, like they're going back and forth, and it's never quite clear like where are they in relation to the kids. It's just a really strange choice all around. This is something that I come back to a lot. I love knowing the geography of a space in a movie, whether it, like, if we're going to be in a house for the whole movie, I like to get a layout of it. I think that's like, I look at a movie like Home Alone, and a movie that came out a year later. Part of what makes Home Alone so great is that in the first 10 minutes, you get a layout of what the whole house looks like, from kind of the basement to the upstairs in the attic, and they do it in this very natural way. And I think there are other road trip movies that have done a really good job of establishing like where it is they are, where they're going, how far it is. And the thing about it is like, they say at one point, I think they're on the road for like 9 days, and in reality, I think it's only been 3. So I think that only further insinuates kind of the logic goals. But clearly this is a very popular movie because it has a Blu-ray release. Kevin Ford is a fan. It has a cult following. This did make a little bit of money. So I don't regret watching this. The movie that we are discussing next week, I regret the choice to rewatch it. But this was downright pleasant compared to that.
for sure. My MVP is Todd Holland because I mean, if the studio wants you to shoot the whole script, and you got to do it. So he did it, even though there was so much cutting room, so much footage on the cutting room floor, but he did it anyway. So my best performance, I'm going to pick Jenny Lewis as Haley. I think she did a great job as in terms of the kid actors. Jimmy's a close second. I almost picked Bo Bridges again, but I felt like, I don't know, there was something missing. He's good, but it's not like what I think he could have been done. And Christian Slater almost has this arc, but he doesn't quite complete it. I felt like there was something he could have done towards the end to kind of make him this like, yeah, he is the older brother, and he is like the actual parent of the family, which I thought they were going for, like the actual good parent of the family. But again, maybe it's just me being that older brother and having that older brother syndrome of thinking like, oh, the parents don't know what's going on. I know what's going on kind of thing. But yeah, Jenny Lewis, I think she did a great job, especially in the Reno scenes when they're at the gambling table playing craps, and then the scene at her home. I thought she did a great job with that.
So I'm going to take a different track here. My MVP, I'm going to give it to Bo Bridges and Christian Slater. I don't think that this movie really works without them. So much of the reaction shots at the end is focusing on Bo Bridges, and that's because he is like there's an emotional center to him that I don't think the other actors have. I'm giving best performance to Luke Edwards as Jimmy just because I think it's so impressive what he's able to convey even without words. Like, again, despite the movie's flaws, I think Luke Edwards does a really, really good job in this movie, and I give him a ton of credit. So that's where I'm going. So I'm giving all the actors the award, so to speak. But yeah, that's kind of where I fall.
For sure. And of course, Fred Savage nowadays is canceled. We talked about that last week. And just look it up. He's been an asshole on set to people. And yeah.
Yeah. That Boy Meets World episode that he's in probably hits a little too close to home, I would guess.
Yeah. See, I didn't even watch that, but it's weird because
have you never watched Boy Meets World?
Are you talking about the new run or the old run? I don't remember him being in the old run.
He was in the old one when they were in college. He was the professor.
Oh shit! The college years. Okay. Yeah, that's towards the end. Yeah, I remember stuff with like him in like middle school and high school stuff, Corey. But yeah.
Oh, that went on for a really long time. Like they started in middle school. They were in college when the show ended.
Yeah, that's why I kind of leaned off those years. But yeah, so if you want to check that out as well. But yeah, Fred Savage, I mean, maybe it's a clue that he was a producer and writer and director on Always Sunny in Philadelphia, a show about assholes. I don't know. You never know. But next week, we're going to end our Mario journey and kind of do a rewatch of the 1993 film that Jerome regrets. I kind of regret, but I feel like it's a good thing because now it's like we can compare the movie we're going to get in April to this. And it's like, okay, we had to see what the dirt worst was in order to see what the best could be. Kind of, if that makes sense, you know what I mean? In that kind of comparison. So next week we're reviewing the 1993 movie Super Mario Brothers. Bob Haskins, John Leguizamo. It's unfortunate, but they did get a lot of drinking done, but because of that they broke bones on set. We'll talk about that. But that's it for this week. Thank you for listening. And if you want to look for that Blu-ray, check it, go for it, and tell us and give us a review about it. But eventually we'll watch the 150-minute version of this movie. So thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again next week.
Listen, we just recorded for 50 minutes with a little Jimmy, and I didn't make a single little Jimmy joke. So all I could say to that is, what's up?